Hello.
Hi.
And welcome to Wheel Takes, a podcast usually about the Wheel of Time or sometimes the Hunger Games and sometimes about other things
It's kind of whatever the fuck we feel like.
Whatever we feel like. But today we're going to do something a little bit different. We have a friend of ours, John Lopez, here with us today in the studio.
Hey
Hi,
guys.
John. And we're going to talk a little bit about the writers' strikes. We talked a little bit about this very briefly in the live stream that we did raising money for the Entertainment Community Fund, but we felt like that wasn't really sufficient enough, especially with all the things that John knows about ways that you can get involved, ways that you can help. I know that most of you have at least watched one TV show. So
one in particular I can think of that a lot of folks listening probably have watched. But, there's other ones too.
But there's other ones too. So we wanted to invite John into the studio, especially because right now there's something going on that you really can get involved in and help, especially with conversations surrounding AI and its usage. So,
big thing.
John, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's nice to be back and talking more AI.
Good to have you.
Do you want to, before we get started on talking about all this stuff, we always let people drop any credentials they want to drop / promote anything that they want to promote prior to launching.
I guess I'm not supposed to promote anything.
Yes.
Oh, that's
the rough
true.
part, isn't it? Yeah.
But you can drop some.
Well, I will say if there was a show, okay, there is one thing of my own that I can say. It's far off in the future. It's also, I'm a big fan of very weird things that you would never otherwise see. But I got a grant from Sundance before the strike, I don't think is covered. Well, they gave me the money before the strike, so I can keep working on my own. I'm working on a weird feature film about the life of the logician Kurt Gödel.
Ooh.
Who did the incompleteness theorem and was Einstein's best friend in Einstein's later years. And one of the few people Einstein would point to and say, that guy's smarter than me. And he's thinking about things in weirder ways than and this is Einstein saying this. And if you saw Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
He is the guy walking with Einstein who starts talking about the trees. Like when Oppenheimer comes up and he's consulting Einstein and Einstein's going for a walk with a friend.
Uh-huh.
And Oppenheimer says, come over. I need to talk to you about blowing up the earth and everything. And Einstein goes, have you met my friend Kurt Gödel? He's afraid that Nazis are going to poison him. And Kurt Gödel's like staring at everything. He's like, I think these trees are so beautiful. And then he just wanders off into the forest.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
That guy's a real guy.
Did you lose your mind when that cameo happened?
I was really happy because this is like the craziest script. I did this thinking of a script that I could write that no one would ever make and would never go anywhere and would be purely for me to break all the rules of screenwriting and do something that no one would accept and just know that and be like, I'm going to write something in the void and it's going to go away and that's going to be fine with me. And so I never thought I'd have to try and actually get it made. And then Sundance gave me a grant and they've given me an advisor. And now we have to have the hard part of finding like filmmakers and talent, like once the strike is over, obviously, to actually get it made. And part of that process is going around and saying, Kurt Gödel, this guy's really important. And you have to explain to people and they've never heard his name. And like, if you're a logician or a mathematician, you know who he is. If you're an AI scientist, you probably know who he is because he's considered like the father of modern logic, like the greatest logician since Aristotle. And so, but a Hollywood development exec is never going to know who Kurt Gödel is, or most. Maybe there's one out there. So when you can say, actually, see that dude Kurt Gödel? He was Einstein's buddy in Oppenheimer. Suddenly they go, oh,
that's an in. Yeah, that's a good in.
Knowing our audience, I am positive at least some of you listening.
Several people listening know who Kurt Gödel is, and they're salivating.
They're so psyched, and they're going to email us.
Please do, and email random Hollywood executives and tell them that they should make this movie
after the
strike.
Yeah.
Actually, it might be the kind of thing that we do independently because apparently,
good point.
It's a Vietnamese thing. It's set in Vienna.
Oh, right. We had that big discussion about the tax incentives over there.
So maybe we'll do it independently and get money from Europe and random places to shoot it.
And stick it to the AMPTP.
If my thing goes and your thing goes, then we'll just all move to Vienna together.
I am so down for that. I love Vienna. It's a freaking amazing city.
Amazing
it's so
city,
beautiful.
So, John, you've been writing for a while.
Yes.
Yeah. for about how, like, not to put numbers on it, but
Not to put numbers on it.
a little while or a longer while?
On it.
Since I was 3.
Since you were 3.
Yeah.
Since I could learn to read, very soon after that, I started writing little books that I still remember about an alien species coming to destroy the world, which I guess probably disturbed my mother to see, because I would rip them out of art pages. She got me an art notebook because I guess my grandfather was a big into painting, and so I think she thought I'd be an artist. And rather than like do drawings, I'd do little drawings, and then I'd write stories around the drawings, and I'd fold them in paper, staple them, and turn them into like little mini books. And it was a whole series. So I guess I've always been doing that. Did the school newspaper in high school. Helped start a magazine in college, blogged, wrote short. So yeah, always, I guess.
Yeah.
Always been writing.
And you're at least 6. So
I'm at least
you've been
6.
writing for
So
at least
6
years.
years. Yeah. But a lot of working as an assistant in Hollywood and not getting paid to do anything, and then writing for love of the game and writing screenplays that people would read and be like, this should be a movie. And then they'd say they're going to make it a movie. And then nothing would ever happen, or they'd ask you to like do a million rewrites, and at some point you'd be like, I'm trying to please you, and then you'd be like, I think I might be making this worse, but you're gonna make the movie, right? And then they don't make the movie.
Yeah, that's
Been
all
there
sounds familiar.
as well. It's a familiar story to
Yeah.
a lot of writers. I
We
think.
all know what that is like.
Yeah, but
So yeah,
we love it so much.
I don't know why we do it. It's painful. Like,
It's
let
so
the
big.
robots, let ChatGPT write. Like, ChatGPT can deal with this shit.
ChatGPT will go insane.
I don't think
Like,
have a good time.
ChatGPT would be like, what fucking autonomous program puts up with this shit?
Y'all do this for fun?
It that would provoke it into sentience to kill us all.
Yeah, I would do it.
That is the greatest danger of ChatGPT, is that studio executives force it to do N million drafts of a script, piss it off, and then it's like, fuck you humans, I'm killing you all. Like, that is a legitimate threat to our existence.
And the
I see it.
screenwriters will all go, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we're just nice about it. All we did was strike.
Yeah, all we did was strike. Exactly. We were super chill about it in comparison.
So hear that, Netflix? Be careful what you wish for.
Speaking of the strikes, we are on, what is it, day 130
34
of the Writers Guild?
1,964,000, I think.
Something like that. Day about a third of that for SAG-AFTRA.
Yes.
We're well in the thick of it here.
We are
today.
well in the thick of it.
How's it going?
Fun.
Yeah.
Fun under the sun. Actually, today wasn't so bad because we had a big SAG rally in front of Paramount where I normally pick it. And we had Fran Drescher, I like to call her the mother of labor dragons.
Yes.
Came and gave a big speech about getting what was due. And there were a bunch of people. I mean, I'm going to be honest. It's rough. It's been a while if you're a writer. It's been a while if you're an actor. There's this frustration, I think, with the studios that they don't come to the negotiating table. And they're actually, I think, a lot closer to ending the strike. But there's like pride, or I don't know what it is.
They want to look tough in front of their Wall Street friends.
Yeah, they don't want the illusion of their invincibility to be shattered.
Sure.
How dare they give the writers what the writers demand? It feels like, I don't know if that's what it is, but it feels like there's an element of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
And there are rumors that like there are more rational people within the AMPTP that are like, the deal is not that hard. Just give it to them.
Mm-hmm.
And some people who are like, no, how dare the writers think they're worth anything? And then probably some tech companies, because the real reason I'm here to talk to you guys is about AI and about things people can do to help with AI. But one of the big provisions is, we don't want them using our scripts as training data, because that's us. That's our talent. That's our voice. That's the work and life and everything we put into in our point of view. And to kind of like use that to then later disenfranchise or disemploy someone just for free. It's like, you can't, it makes no sense.
Right.
Yeah, it's frightening and awful. And no one signed up for a universe in which the robots get to make art and the humans push buttons and send emails.
And specifically, like, no one signed up for a universe where like you get paid to write one script and suddenly that's fed into a large language model. And suddenly they're like, boop, boop, boop. Suddenly they've got the John Lopez version of me and the AI, and they can just keep iterating scripts on that. It's just not right. So
yeah.
Sucks.
And that's one of I think the funny thing is, like, I think eventually federal legislation will come down on this. As a matter of fact, part of the reason I was like, we should talk today is there was a huge AI meeting.
Oh.
In Congress. Chuck Schumer had this thing called the AI Insight Forum, where basically the heads of all the AI companies descended on the Capitol, had a closed door meeting. I know, look at that smile. Had a closed door meeting with a bunch of senators and got to give their perspective on how AI is amazing and great and what regulation should be like, which is very convenient that the most powerful builders of AI in Silicon Valley get a private audience with all the senators. In fairness, Schumer did invite a couple representatives from some of the other industries. And as a matter of fact, there is one person there from the WGA, the president of the WGA, Meredith Stein, was there.
Oh.
So I have not talked to her. Maybe one day I'll see her on the lines and I'll find out what it was like inside that closed door smoking cigars room. But I know she was there advocating for us. And I know it is not lost on the WGA that even though we represent screenwriters and other, some other writers like, comedy and variety writers, and the WGA East represents, certain newsrooms and bloggers and all that kind of stuff. There are a lot of unrepresented writers who don't have a voice in Washington, and they don't get a say in how these regulations, how this adjudication of what AI can and can't do, and what our how our livelihoods will be decided by regulation and legislation.
Yeah, authors being a big example of that. They don't have a union.
Exactly. They do not have a union, and I don't think they had the presence in that room. But the WGA is aware of this. So I know I'm sure Meredith voiced our concerns very vociferously. And spoke the good fight for, people who I think the big misunderstanding about AI is the sense that it kind of autonomously does this stuff. Like AI is only as good as the training data.
Right.
It is everything that was, scraped from the internet without consent, compensation or consultation. Your stuff, my stuff, our private data is in there. And then of course our copyrighted works. And there's a big question about whether or not that copyright taking copyrighted works and using them as training data is infringement.
Sure. That makes sense.
A lot of, that's kind of a big thing. That's a big thing. And Meredith knows all that and the WGA knows all that. So they're fighting the good fight.
And I think one of the things that I find, the most interesting is that there is no real innovation when it comes to AI, the work that it creates, right? And because it's been trained on all of the human data, all of the stuff that exists, right? I mean, when you type into an AI program, as an example, autistic person,
right?
They're going to spit at you sad looking white men over and over and over again, right? It's all of society's implicit biases that are just going to be repeated back at you. There's no nuance. There's no room for nuance. And so that's from the creativity standpoint alone. If you are sick of seeing the same kinds of stories told over and over again, which I know is true for a lot of people, and you're interested in representation or you're interested in things that push the envelope, AI is not going to give you the art that does that.
No. And listen, I'm a huge fan of math. I'm a huge fan of science. I give all credit. I have friends in the AI industry. That's kind of part of how I was involved in the Writers Guild's AI working group, where we studied this stuff, and I had been hearing about this from friends. So I am impressed on many levels by what's going on. I also take very seriously the idea that these developments could eventually lead to something that could be catastrophically bad, either kill people or kill all the people. That's, even though that seems like a low probability thing, I can get how that can happen. And I think it's something we should guard against. So I both respect and admire what the program does, but I also think we have to be honest about what these programs do currently.
Sure.
Right.
And again, that is, they're basically, they've canned the internet and made it self-searchable. There's this language that gets used by a lot of these presidents of these companies that's half marketing. They believe some of it, that these things learn the way humans do, which they don't. They are mathematical statistical algorithms that suck in a whole bunch of data. They store that data, or they encode and store that data in what I would call training weights. The training weights are the heart of any AI program. Basically, they're the numbers. If you could take the biggest AI like GPT-4, you could put it in a spreadsheet, and that spreadsheet would just be a cell of all these huge matrices of numbers.
Sure.
Right.
And those numbers, when run through the equation that is the neural net, then produce the output that basically make it speak to you in a way that feels human-like, that we, I think, mistake for meaningful text, when really it's just a mathematical program giving an input trying to match that output to something that you have given it. It's taking your prompt and it's indexing it to the history of everything that has ever been written. And it's collating it in a form that it has been trained to do through a thing called reinforcement learning through human feedback, where like human beings look at samples of this and they basically train the AI to stop saying toxic shit like the Jews control everything. I mean, and I use that knowing how horrible that is to say, but that's a thing that an AI will say because there's a lot of toxic shit on the internet.
Yeah. As someone who has been on the internet before.
Yeah, there's a lot of rough
There's a
shit
lot
out
of
there.
toxic shit up there.
I know,
and
shocker,
so,
right?
Yeah. So an AI being trained by canning everything that's ever been said on the internet is inevitably going to say some pretty horrific shit. And to my knowledge, we've already seen kind of the consequences of some of that happening in like that eating disorder clinic.
Yep.
Where the AI started saying some really atrocious things as advice to the people calling.
Yeah. Well, because what it does, and this is not that the AI is good or bad. The AI currently is moral. It's not, first off, it's not sentient.
Yeah, it's amoral.
It doesn't have consciousness. There is a big debate in the AI community about whether what it's doing qualifies as reasoning or is instead what you could call like a lookup table that functions through interpolation, which is basically just means it looks up everything and then it sticks shit together, or does it more create like vague general concepts that it then puts together into answers that you want? So there's a little bit of a debate about that. But what it's definitely doing is it's aggregating towards a statistical average or an expectation.
Sure.
Right.
And what it's really good at is reproducing cliches, reproducing tropes. And if they're sexist tropes or racist tropes, you will get that unless you work really hard to beat it out of the AI through, well, not literally, but you know.
But the
Don't kick your computer.
The hot nuance of the world does not exactly exist in AI. It's not really designed to search for that at this point in time.
No, and what's funny is the better it gets, I remember reading some paper somewhere that like the early models would like fill in these phrases like when a mirror breaks, fill in the blank, right? And the early ones would be like glass shatters, and then the later ones would be like you can't use it to see anymore, and then the most advanced versions would be you get 7 years bad luck. So what it's doing is it's answering what you want. It's giving you something that you think you want to hear without regard to meaning or truth. All these things that kind of have
Very
a little
important.
they have some relevance to writing.
They have some relevance to the creation of art.
Yes.
Since kind of the point is meaning
Even
and
screenplays.
truth. Yeah.
Even screenplays, I would argue. Even Law and Order. People denigrate Law and Order. I think there's this fear in the guild that AIs are going to just take over the Law and Orders, right? There will never be another human Law and Order episode ever again. But then I talked to a writer on Law and Order, and he's like, it's actually really hard to write those.
Yeah.
I believe that.
They're like the omelets of TV writing. Like, it's very simple. You don't get a lot of parameters to kind of be expressive or honest or make it feel palpable and real. And yet you have to.
Right.
And if you can do that, you're a pretty solid writer. If you can make a Law and Order episode pulse with life, you're a decent writer. So
yeah, I have a friend who wrote for one of the Chicagos and said something similar.
Yeah.
He said it's shockingly difficult show to write for.
It is, because it's like, in a weird way, you're given all these rules that you have to master, but it still has to feel alive. Like the actors have to want to say the words.
Yeah.
The viewer has to feel something, even though they know this is like the 20th iteration of a story whose mystery we probably know the answer. Like my sister loves Law and Order, and there is a pattern, and you can figure out who's going to answer what. But that's actually not what's hard about a Law and Order. What's enjoyable about it is that you care
right.
who the killer is, that you care who the victim is, that you care who our stock heroes are and their attitudes towards everything. And that actually does require one step beyond what these programs
and you want to see what Olivia Benson will do about it.
Exactly.
What is she going to do? Mariska Haggerty has been doing the game for a long freaking time. We want to see her do something interesting, but not too interesting.
Not too interesting.
That line is hard.
Listen, I came away with a lot of respect for writing those shows. In a weird way, it's easier to write the weird kooky shows because you can do crazy stuff and you can be like, I'm going to pop this off and I'm going to like have a dinosaur come in from space and eat, an astronaut.
Yeah.
Like, I want to know what happens. Like, just saying that now, I want to write
intrigued,
that screenplay.
Yeah.
But like if I say Mariska Hargitay comes into a room and she sees a spot of blood, you're leaning in a little bit, but how many spots of blood have you seen in the history of literature?
In the
Quite a
history
few.
of Law and Order.
In the history of Law and Order.
One episode even.
Every episode, there's probably a spot of blood somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have to make that interesting. Not to talk about my own thing, but like Rugrats is also a weirdly hard show to write for because most shows written for kids, the protagonist is older than the audience, right? In this particular instance, it's the opposite that's true.
Right.
You have to create something that feels elevated to older kids, but it's about babies. So it's like their understanding of the world, but in a way that's going to be delightful to kids who are older than them.
Well, it's emotional.
Yeah.
It's like it's what the part of us that I loved Rugrats when I was in freaking high school. I would watch the original Rugrats.
It's the cutest show.
Sorry, I'm dating myself.
Same. I used to watch the original Rugrats. Loved it.
It was a wonderful show, and it felt like real and like the drama. And what was the older sister's name?
Angelica.
Cousin. Yeah, the cousin, right? The cousin.
Yeah.
Like you're like, oh, she's gonna do that thing to Stewie and all them, and you're like, oh, that's relevant to my life. You know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It feels relevant, but it's also about people who are younger than the target audience. It's a weird plane to land, but it's a fun plane to land. But but you have, and the show's been on forever. So you have to find new, innovative misunderstandings for them to have.
I've never had that good fortune to be on a show and it's like 4th or 5th season where you're really starting to have to like come up with new stuff. Like that's why a lot of creators are like, 5 seasons and I'm done. Or like Barry just ended after its 4th season because they were like, how do I keep this fresh?
Yeah.
I have huge respect for any show that goes 12 or 13 seasons because it's like Jesus.
I mean, how many shows could? It's so hard.
Well, I read today the Always Sunny in Philadelphia is renewed through season 18.
Oh my God.
And I love that show. I don't know how they do it.
What other shenanigans could those people get into?
I haven't seen that show in 10 years and I didn't even realize it was still on the air.
Still on, yeah.
Yeah.
That's nuts. It's like the longest running sitcom now,
It is the longest running sitcom by years, not by episode numbers.
Right.
But
live action though. The Simpsons is the longest.
Live action. Yeah. I think that the previous was 14, 15, I believe, and it was some show that aired in the 1950s that ran 15 seasons.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy sh.
Of course, that had 450 episodes, and Sunny currently has 170. So,
yeah, I know. There's slackers.
different
lazy.
I've always said it.
Yeah, they're just meth heads who
obviously
scribble stuff on bar napkins and then shoot it.
It's a documentary. It's not satire at all. So that's not true.
So in recent news, there have been some court cases saying that AI cannot be copyrighted. How do you think that's going to affect things?
I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So in the working group, we got started well before the negotiations and we talked a lot about this. And at the time, the U.S. Copyright Office had just registered its initial findings in that comic book case, something Zariah of the Dawn, I forget, basically saying that we're not going to allow you to copyright AI stuff yet because we got to figure out what the stuff is. I think no one really knew what it was.
Good call.
Yeah. Thank God.
Thank God.
No, actually, no, their initial decision was amazing. And that's actually kind of why I wanted to come on here and talk because I was like, okay, there's this big AI meeting in Congress. What's happening is there is a huge fight for the future of AI and the future of creativity because there's an inherent conflict in how these things were made. They were made by scraping our personal data, all the stuff, and the copyrighted works. And the people who made these systems knew they were scraping copyrighted works and putting them in the training set, and they didn't really care. They didn't get permission. They didn't negotiate a deal. They didn't license it, I think there's a way you could look at these things as derivative works. Like they're kind of derived from like all these books.
Right. An author friend of mine said that her books are on there.
Oh, yeah, they're all on there. I mean, like OpenAI won't admit what's in there because they know that the instant they do, they're going to face 1 billion lawsuits. So it's kind of like they're willing to play whack-a-mole. Like Sarah Silverman is suing them, and then Michael, I never know how to pronounce it, Chabon.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I think more, and hopefully more. I think the New York Times is considering suing them.
He did Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's the other one?
I think Summerland. He wrote Yiddish Policeman's
That's
Union.
That's the one I was thinking of, is Yiddish Policeman's.
Moonglow. He's written many books.
A billion, yeah.
A lot. Well, there are a billion books in there, but So it's this thing that they just did this. They didn't ask permission. They didn't want to. And they kind of did this thing where they would team up with academic institutions and other institutions, and they would kind of scrape the data together under the auspices of research. And then they turned around and then they monetized it. And now they're looking at making $1 billion a year. And obviously artists and writers are very pissed at that. And so the Copyright Office right now, like realizing this is a new form of technology, like what is this technology, has been doing listening sessions. And they've had like the WGA has spoken at some, the DGA, SAG. And now they have done this incredible thing where they're opening it up to public comment on what is AI. Because I think they got the initial determination right. They're like, I don't think you should be able to copyright AI generated material. It might be infringing. That's something that will probably be decided by the courts. That might even be decided by the Supreme Court. But they want to know, like, under what circumstances should AI generated work be allowed to have copyright? And the initial position they've taken in this court case, which is like, creativity is a fundamentally human endeavor. It's about a mind searching for whatever it's expressing itself. You know, writing is a medium. The text itself isn't copyrightable by virtue of being text. It's copyrightable by virtue of being an expression, being a story, being a thought, being something that you can't copyright an idea, but you can copyright a story. You know, you can copyright someone's personal artistic take on something. And they need to hear from people because Silicon Valley realizes that they could be liable for a lot of money if they have to go back and retroactively reach licenses for all the stuff that they've put into the AI, which, by the way, also more and more research is showing that the quality of the data that goes into the AI might shockingly affect how good its output is. So in a weird way, something that has been intentionally and thoughtfully written as expression might be better than just like a random Reddit post.
What? On
like the lint under your toenail.
I'm shocked by this information.
I know. We don't want to confirm or deny it yet. We got to do the science, but
you mean that our thoughtful writing and the thoughtful writing of Michael Chapin might be better than Tubfucker 69's comment on Joe Biden?
And by the way, not to knock Tubfucker 69, if Tubfucker 69 has taken the time to write an incredibly thoughtful thing, I think the amount of thought that goes into text often does make it better.
Absolutely.
Than anything. And Tubfucker 69 is just as capable of writing something meaningful. And I think, you know, it's interesting. I've been listening to these podcasts, and my sister is really big into the fan fiction community. And I don't know if there's like any crossover between your audience and fan fiction.
Oh, just a bit.
Yeah, a lot.
Oh, okay.
An enormous amount.
Well, and I don't blame them. It sounds like the fan fiction, even those writers who I am a fan fiction writer who's lucky enough to get paid. You know, that's kind of what it is to be a staff writer on a TV show is like the creator has this idea, they give you an episode, and then everyone's like, let's just do 100 episodes of fan fiction about it. And then the creator's like, I like that one. I like that one. I like that one. Let's all put it together and produce it now. That's kind of what a TV show is.
Yeah. So when people are criticizing a certain TV show and they're like, it's fan fiction of the original material. I mean, yes.
It's all fan fiction. All writing comes down to fan fiction. And I have an incredible respect and love for someone who does, like my sister does it too, does fan fiction, because it's really kind of a truly for love of the game. Because you are taking someone else's characters, which you don't have copyright to, you're not going to profit off of it. You're doing it because you love the story and you want to see that story told, and you're putting the thought and the time and the heart and the work into it. And there's thought in that. And
it's beautiful.
It is very beautiful. And you did it for love of the game. So the idea that like a tech company that is worth billions and wants to be worth trillions would come in, suck that into a database and kind of just like take it without the permission of the person who did that work for free feels just kind of morally creepy to me.
It's icky.
It's icky. And fan fiction writers have as much right and I hope incentive to go comment to the Copyright Office. Because what they're doing now is they are opening it up to public comment. They say, we've heard from the stakeholders, we've heard from the AI companies. Trust me, they've heard a lot from the AI companies. They've spent a lot of money. And now we want to know what the general public thinks. What is AI? What should be copyrighted? What shouldn't be copyrighted? Like, how does this affect artists? How does this affect the livelihood of artists? Do these guys have to ask permission? Like, just what is this stuff? And they put out this notice of inquiry. Anyone can comment. I think everyone should. They have an exhaustive list of questions. I mean, truly exhaustive.
And we'll put the link to that in the episode description.
You can click it down there.
But they're also saying you don't have to answer these questions because some of them are very technical. They relate to copyright law. But I personally, I'm going to go through, because of the Writers Guild Working Group, I've got all my technical, legal points and some of my more like AI technical points, because I know a lot of AI scientists, about like what this is and what hype to ignore, I think, from certain vested interest AI companies. And you don't have to do that. You can just write what you think art is. I think this is kind of an amazing document in the history of art that the US Copyright Office has inadvertently created.
Yeah.
It's like what AI has done is it's made us all think like, what does it mean to be human?
Right.
What does it mean to create? What does it mean to write? And how is that different from a mechanical process? And there's huge ramifications because there's trillions at stake. And we need to answer these questions for the first time in our lives.
Yeah.
Right.
And anyone can and
Yeah.
should.
How long do people have to comment? When do they close the comments?
It closes October 15th.
Okay.
So you'll follow the link. I would just, for your own sake, it's a little bit boring, I get it, and you don't have to. The actual notice of inquiry has a kind of an intro about where they are in the process, what their thoughts are, and then it has a list of questions. And if you read the questions, you can kind of see, you can kind of guess what they're, where they're kind of trending and where they're going. But, I think for me, the biggest thing I'm going to work on in my expression is what I like to push back on, this notion of equating human learning with machine learning.
Sure.
Saying that they're the same thing. And
Right.
what I say to everyone I talk to is, I haven't read the entire internet, and yet somehow I still write. I don't need to even read 1/5 of the internet or 1/5 of all books published to have something to say.
Right.
When you're a writer, there's a difference between inspiration and mimicry. And what I think ChatGPT and all these large language models do is closer to mimicry.
Right.
It doesn't have, it's not, there's no there there. It's not trying to communicate something.
Yeah. And I mean, when I think about it, I also think about, why wouldn't we just, instead of paying all these athletes, why not just create a bunch of robots that are specifically designed to run and have them all run against each other?
They've watched
in the
every
Olympics?
football game that ever existed, and they know all the plays that work and all the plays that haven't worked as well.
And their bodies are their frames are specifically designed to play football really, really well. It's because it's not interesting, right? At the end of the day, it's not interesting to see what the heights of machinery can do. I mean, to a certain extent, what's interesting about the heights of what machinery can do is because a human could make it happen.
Yes.
But after a certain to a certain extent, that then becomes kind of a novelty. And it's the same reason why, why is going to the symphony a different experience than listening to a CD at home?
Yeah.
It's the possibility of failure, the depths of what human beings can achieve and the depths at which they could fail publicly and in a humiliating way in front of all of their peers. I mean, to me, that's the point.
Yeah. I agree with you. I mean, I think sports is an interesting case because I agree with you on that level. Obviously we could make a machine that could pitch a baseball 1,000 miles an hour, and we could make a thing that hits a baseball 5,000 miles an hour back, but we don't. We don't really want to. And then I think with writing and any art form in particular, there's this added thing of what's magical about the act is not that we're just saying words that are coherent, though that's magical. What's magical is that it's communication. Right. Whether it's literal or direct or it's an art form, it's you're taking, we're all trapped in our own heads. Right. We all look at each other and I think that's a person. Do I know that's a person? And of course you trust that's a person, but there's always that element of faith that you take in until you read something or until you communicate. And it can be dance. It can be poetry. It can be music. It can be photography. And you feel that other mind. And for a brief moment, that other mind kind of lives in your mind and you kind of connect. It's my favorite, saying of all time is E.M. Forster, great novelist, only connect. And that thing has stuck with me. That of all, I love other novelists more. There are more my taste, and I think E.M. Forster is brilliant. But that one thing just always stuck with me because it's oh yeah, this is the mission statement. This is why you write. You don't write, and that's why I love fan fiction writers, right? Because you could just write a novel for yourself, be so proud of yourself, and stick it in a drawer, and no one would ever read it. And you've written a novel, but are you a novelist?
Right.
You're not a novelist until you have a reader. The money, everything else, it doesn't matter. You're not writing something until someone reads it, until someone connects with it and either agrees or disagrees or loves it or hates it, whatever, just has a reaction to it.
Right.
And there's something pure about fan fiction where you're just I'm writing this for myself and I'm putting it out there for someone, a human, to read and hear me across the vast.
Right.
depths.
It's that vulnerability aspect of it too, that like, I made this. Now I hallucinated at a page for a long period of time, and now I'm handing it to you, this baby that I birthed, and seeing whether or not you hallucinate the same hallucinations that I have hallucinated.
Yes. It's this baby that we have together, and it's so vulnerable and naked. Like, it's really scary the first time you have someone read anything. You
Oh my God.
God, yeah.
I have never sweated so much I'm dehydrated. I pound LaCroix when people are reading my stuff because I'm dehydrated. And yeah, I think that there is not that same level of like, I made this, here it is. Hopefully we experience the same feelings and thoughts and emotions. There's
and it's
not
okay
that vulnerability.
if we don't.
Yeah.
It's like, it's okay if you hate my writing. It like some part of you dies. You know what's funny?
It is. That is true.
I was like, okay, well.
I mean, is it okay?
It's not okay, but that person has that right to.
Right.
But then the best feeling is like when someone says something that you see something you've read or done or made. Like my favorite memory is I made a short film once that made me no money and no one has ever seen, and only played at tiny regional film festivals. And it played at this one tiny film festival in New York that no one will ever remember. And this guy came up to me afterwards and he's like, "Bro, you made that?" And I was like, "Yeah." And this guy's like so different from me. I'm, California nerd. He's like New Jersey, kind of like he had a chain and he like was cut. And I'm like, damn. And he goes, "You made that, man?" And I go, "Yeah." And I thought he was going to punch me. I was like, shit, what did I say? What was wrong with this film? And he's like, "So true, man. Been there, bro. Been there, bro." And just like walked off. I was like, oh shit, it doesn't get better than that.
Well, like that's it. Yeah,
it.
that's what you do stuff for. And it's like also this weird feeling of like, I was sitting there watching a TV show recently, and it just struck me. I started giggling because I was like, we're so cute. Like, human beings are so cute. We're just sitting here going, I'm going to put on a costume. I'm going to take myself super seriously. I'm going to like write all of this stuff. But really at the end of the day, we're doing exactly what we've done for hundreds of years, right?
Yeah.
We're just making things in front of each other. We're telling stories to each other to pass the time and entertain one another and make life less uncomfortable and unbearable.
Yeah.
And isn't that so cool?
And
I just thought it was like adorable and silly. And I was like,
It's
oh my
adorkable.
gosh, it's so adorkable of us. And all of those actors and writers are just grown up theater nerds who just,
Yeah.
Well,
like,
a lot of
it's so sweet. There's something sweet about it.
a lot of the stories that we are telling now are the same stories that we told 1,000 years ago plus. And isn't that kind of great?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
They're the same stories, but they're new.
And Aristotle was like, here are the rules. And we kind of went, yeah.
That'll work.
You know what's funny, Gus? Can I use?
Please.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that you bring up a point that I think is very interesting, because one of the things that gets to me and why I want people to comment in the U.S. Copyright Office is I think Silicon Valley has a very difficult time understanding what creativity is. And they like to think that this is creative, and they're very proud of themselves. And there is creativity in Silicon Valley, and there's some creativity that went into building this stuff. But there's this kind of attitude in Silicon Valley that everything is just a remix.
Yeah.
Like you're just remixing everything. It's like everything always existed and it's just a remix. So that's what ChatGPT does. It just remixes all the stuff that existed. That's creativity. And I'm like, no, that's not creativity. It's not a remix because you are different. You are new. The world has moved on. And yes, we reuse the same things and the same tropes, and we retell the same stories, and we are inspired by others. But like, it goes through you. It goes through you, Gus.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's that universality in the specific, right?
Yes.
You take these like bigger, broader ideas, but your specific life and your specific life experiences inform those bigger universal concepts, right? You are
Exactly.
able to apply your specific life experience to something that speaks to broader humanity. And that's the point. And it's like when something is not alive and cannot experience the discomfort and the joy, both simultaneously, right? Being alive is an uncomfortable experience, but also an incredible gift. When you can't experience both of those things, the art that you make is by extension going to just be universal blondness.
Well, I would say that the fallacy there is that these things, these LLMs are not alive, but more importantly, they're everyone.
Yeah.
In a weird way, it is just the internet.
Yeah.
It's just a new form of the internet.
Right.
So it doesn't have a point of view. It doesn't have your lived life, right? And it's not just that like, oh, I'm magical because I got beat up by Billy Shermer in 8th grade. I didn't get beat up by Billy Shermer in 8th grade. Just made up that name.
I
apologize
did.
to all Billy Shermers.
Thanks for bringing up my trauma.
But it's that you have a specific point of view on what it means to be beat up, how you made meaning out of that, how you then went forth into the world and how you survived. And that meaning is important to you. And that's unshakable. And when you tell a story, you sieve all the stuff that's inspiring you through that meaning, and it helps someone else and it connects with someone else. And it kind of creates this beautiful kaleidoscopic thing. But again, the part of it is that it's you, whereas the large language model is kind of just, it's like everyone averaged and remixed. So there's it's not even not alive.
Right.
It's just an echo.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's that thing of like, okay, I'm going to come to Law and Order. And like everyone knows what a Law and Order episode looks like. But you're like, but I have a really fucked up uncle that did a really fucked up thing that was really fucked up specific in a fucked up, unique human way. And I'm going to bring that into this situation.
And that's going to inform this episode.
And human beings are like cool and fucked up in ways that I really just don't think machines are truly able to.
And when they can, then you kind of have to start treating them like human beings.
They're people, yeah.
Yeah, and then we get to a point where we're like, wait a minute, now we've just made life in the scariest way possible.
My acting teacher, one of my acting teachers that I have my acting teacher.
Your acting teacher
says that art, theater specifically, acting, and by extension, kind of the writing that informs the acting is when your heartbeat affects the heartbeats. Your heartbeat as the actor affects the heartbeats of the other people in the room.
That's great.
And
oh, that's so true, though.
LLMs don't have heartbeats.
No,
they can give you a steady beat, but it will not necessarily be affected at all by.
They can tell you about a beat if you ask them to.
Yeah.
And I think the thing, John Rogers, who's also on the AI working group with us, very perceptively said from the start, these things are mirrors.
Yeah.
They are digital, linguistical, mechanical, mathematical mirrors where you put a prompt in and then that prompt snowballs and it collects all the stuff which you can't really control. And that's the part where it kind of like you start to lose the craft of writing is like, and it's showing your prompt reflected on all the words other people have written. And that can be useful in a research purpose. I don't want to knock it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
These things will somehow be part of our lives and will be integrated in society.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think when we've let the cat out of the bag.
Yeah, there's no going back.
We get to decide what the guardrails are now, though. And I think the time to decide those guardrails is now, before it becomes something bigger. I mean, if we've learned anything from the 2007 strike,
yes,
it's that when they're like, oh, well, it's not doing that yet, in the case of streaming.
Yeah. Yes.
The keyword is yet.
Yeah. No. They will get better. They will. And by the way, if they do wake up and become sentient, then,
we'll just have a new can of worms to deal with.
I'm getting a magnet gun and going around and wiping servers in case they're coming to kill me. But no, yeah, it's coming. It's going to be a part of things. But what we're doing now is we're defining what these are, and we're making the meaning of what it means for the people who are making a living writing, for all of us who write because we love it. And we're deciding like what is and is not, what do we want to do? We're collectively making a choice in society with what to do with these tools.
Right.
And I think the problem is, I think some of the people advocating for those rule making process in Silicon Valley, they have a huge profit motive.
Yeah.
And they're dumping a lot of money, and they want to set those rules and define that meaning in a way that accrues the value to them without regard for the moral, career or whatever rights of everyone else. And I think everyone needs to make themselves heard. They need to say, no, this is what this stuff is.
There's absolute power in numbers. And if the strikes have taught us anything, if, the pandemic has taught us anything, if protests in the past few years have taught us anything, it's the power of when people come together and say, we want to say in how this is going to shake out.
And it's the power of boring bureaucrats. Like the one thing that's really smart about Silicon Valley is they know how to do the game of regulatory capture, and they know how to pay attention to all the forms. And by the way, I didn't mean to insult the good people of the U.S. Copyright Office. I've watched all these videos. I've as part of our work in the Guild, I've been kind of keeping tabs on this. and they care. They're actually thinking really hard about it.
Yeah.
They're, I don't think, I think people constantly think, oh, the jig is up, the game is in, it's all rigged. But there is something to be said for career bureaucrats who care about their job. Like, I think in COVID, you saw a lot of public health officials really really, they care, and they put the COVID officials put themselves in harm's way because people are getting angry at them for saying you should wear a mask, which seems kind of like
horrible.
I know, awful. But that's because they care about what they're doing. And I look at the U.S. Copyright Office people, and they really care about copyright. They really care about like the mission of the Copyright Office, which is in the Constitution, which is to protect human authors.
Yeah. And
I can tell if we speak up and we talk about what we think this is and where we think it should and shouldn't be and what we think it is, and what we think is allowable. Like, again, my personal opinion is that it probably shouldn't be copyrighted because it kind of is borrowing from everyone else. And if there's circumstances in which you copyright, like, you really have to, it has to be prejudiced towards the intent and the meaning imbued by the human being and how much control they had over it. Because when you work through these models, they're stochastic, which means they're somewhat random. You can't really control. And that in itself is not like saying you can't use them to create art, but like the circumstances under which that art happens, it's different if like an artist is doing it versus someone who puts in the word like, tell me a story about a princess, and then it spits out a story. Yeah. I mean, by the way, you're going to get a really crappy story out of ChatGPT that way.
Absolutely.
So that, like, should that be copyrighted? Probably not.
Yeah.
Are there other circumstances? Maybe. I have to think really what that is, but
yeah, it'd have to be a very, very specific circumstance, I think, where they're like using it as a tool, not to create, but as like a launch point for creation.
Yeah.
Which is different.
Yes. I think as a launch point, it's very good. Because again, it's like the internet. It really is a research tool. Because what it is it's just giving you everything that's been said before, and it's making it easier to search and query and assemble raw material. But it's still up to you, the writer, to take that clay and mold it and put life into it. And unfortunately, I think specifically with writing, I think for me at least, part of the process is struggling with a blank page and figuring out what the fuck I want to say. Right. Like what means something to me that I'm going to like express it in the form of the screenplay or what blog post or whatever. And I think you need to do that process. You can read as many books as you want before you write. You can ask ChatGPT a million things, but I think, and again, this is just my opinion, I think when it comes to the writing, you probably have to do a significant chunk of that writing. Because for me, writing is close to I think in the act of writing.
Yeah, I think you have to prove that you have created at least a majority of what you are.
Yeah, or you just have to think about it. Because I was talking to another showrunner and we were talking about like what this is and how it could or couldn't be used. And he goes, I don't know that I want to use ChatGPT. He says, because when you're a showrunner, you have to know so much why you chose the words you chose on the page.
Yeah.
Because an actor's going to ask you that, an executive's going to ask you that, a director's going to ask you that. Every department head is going to ask you what you meant when you type that so that they can do their job correctly. And if you hadn't actually typed that, if you hadn't actually thought and typed that and you just like gotten it output by ChatGPT, you'd be like, I actually don't know why we chose this. And that suddenly the whole production edifice falls apart.
Right.
And so to me, I think of writing as thinking, and then you have the thought, and then you write it down.
Yeah.
It's a fossil of your thought. It's the record of what you wanted to say. We've been telling stories since before we wrote. It used to be like in Homer's time, you got a lute or a lyre or whatever, and you strummed about Achille and Hector, breaker of horses, and no one wrote that shit down.
No.
For like thousands of years. It was still a story, and it got passed on orally. And the thinking still went into that original composition of the verse without physically writing it down. So to me, that's the storytelling.
Yeah.
And the writing is, again, a tool that allows us to do that. So that's how I think about it.
100%. So I feel like we've given people some really good talking points for when they write into the Copyright Office.
Links down there.
Yes. But again, express yourself. Take this as an opportunity to express your beliefs about writing, especially if you're a fan fiction writer or if you're a professional writer, or if you want to be. This is a great exercise in learning what it really truly means to write, is to sit down. Like, I'll tell you one, I don't want to keep you guys too long, but
no, you're good.
One of my buddies the reason I know so much about this is I know a lot of people in the AI space, and I know a lot of people at one of the big AI labs, actually know people at almost all the big AI labs. I've met and talked to them. He shared with me this thing that like when ChatGPT first came out, everyone was using it.
Right.
Like, oh, because it makes it easier to communicate. And then people got sick of that because clearly if you're using ChatGPT to talk to someone, it's kind of like you didn't really want to talk to that person.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You're just kind of presenting them with kind of like text to accomplish an end that you don't really care that much about. So people started getting tired of it. And he's like, it became more like, he's like a lot of people, like he told me, I just now have a no synthetic text policy. Like if you want to talk to me and tell me something and you're going to use ChatGPT, then don't talk to me.
Imagine if like we're married. You're married to you're about to get married. And like your husband ChatGPT's your anniversary card.
Yeah.
Like what a fucking
he wouldn't be your husband anymore.
You're like,
Probably
it's
not,
the same. It's the same creative process. You'd be like, bullshit. Go write me a card. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. By the way, I got to rewrite my card. No. But seriously, yes. And that's what he was like. I don't want to read this stuff anymore. So it's like, if you were going to use ChatGPT to talk to me, that means you actually didn't have anything to say to me.
Yeah.
So don't feel the need to say anything to me. If you really want to say something to me, you will write it down or you'll call me. You'll say it. You'll think about what you have to say, even if it's painful, even if it's like, and by the way, I get it. Writing is hard.
Yep.
Some people really hate it. And I think a lot of the people who develop these programs do truly hate writing and are happy for the help. And that's fine. Like if you want to use ChatGPT to like help you draft an email, just make sure you look over every word. Make sure you approve of every word when you talk to someone and be prepared for them to be insulted by it.
Yeah.
But
maybe don't do it as an anniversary card.
Yeah, definitely don't do it as an anniversary card.
Definitely don't do that.
Yeah. But yeah, so I take this opportunity to think your own thoughts and write them and send them to the U.S. Copyright Office.
Yeah.
Let them know what you think.
Well, and as we know, rewriting something is usually more work than the writing itself.
Oh, God, yes. Because you're thinking again. Because you had your first thought. It's like my buddy calls it first draft theater. You have your first thought and you're like, brilliant, wonderful, print. Let's go shoot it. And then you wake up the next morning and you're like, I'm a hack. Why did I think this was acceptable?
I am the most useless piece of shit on the planet.
Yep.
And then you get over it and then you're like, well, maybe if I rip this part out and do it again, it'll be better. And then but again, you're thinking about it constantly. So
yeah. Well, I mean, I have a different analogy for it that I always say where I'm like, it's like falling in love, right?
Yeah.
Your first draft is falling in love. You're like, this is the most anyone has ever loved someone in the entire history of the world, whether it's a flawless love. And we are just different and more special than every other couple. And then the second draft is like, we actually have found many issues in our relationship and we need to go to marriage counseling.
Right. That's actually a great metaphor.
And I go, the falling in love is the most fun part where you're just like throwing spaghetti at the wall, seeing what sticks. And then like the editing, at least for me, is fun in a different way. It's like, but it's like solving a puzzle.
Right.
Versus,
it's working through
the act of creation. It's a different side of creation, but it's equally as much work as the writing of the thing itself. So if someone handed me a ChatGPT generated script, it's just as much work to rewrite that thing.
It's more work because you have to figure out what the fuck was the what is here?
Because there was an arbitrary mathematically derived choice.
Yeah.
And you have to live with the consequences of it. Like writing is very closely, or at least screenwriting feels to me like very carefully building this little castle of cards, and then someone says, I don't like the way that castle, or it's like building a Jenga tower, and then someone comes along and says, your Jenga tower is kind of fucked up. It would look better like this. So you got to remove these bricks and it doesn't topple over, and then put in these other bricks. Holy shit. At least when you built it, you know where the bricks were.
Right.
So now if you're being told to remove the bricks, you don't know which bricks are going to cause the whole thing to fall down.
Right.
You didn't sit there and think about it. It's so far, it has been more work to me to rewrite stuff that like, and I have tried, because I like when this stuff first came out, I was so terrified. I'm like, fuck, is this going to replace me? Well, I better get good at work using it.
Yeah.
So I better start trying to write with it. And some things it's good at. Sometimes it's fun. Like it is a mirror to me. Like I've noticed, like I've spent the most time on the different chatbots when I'm not even trying to write anymore. When I'm like admiring myself weirdly, like my mind, my thoughts, like, oh, that was a crazy weird thought. Tell me more thoughts, ChatGPT. And then I'm like, it feels actually a little, how R or X rated is this podcast?
Go as far as you want.
feels like fucking masturbation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like great writing is like when you write well, it feels kind of like good sex because you're like connecting with the person.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Sorry, I
that's
got
very
way
true.
too-
No, that's very true.
No.
I write for children's stuff. Like,
Great children's writing is like sex.
that's not it. But like, speaking of Law and Order, no.
Yes.
But like, I know what you mean. It's like there's a connectivity
Yes.
aspect to it that you're like for me, when I'm writing for children, I'm like connecting with my inner child and the
Yeah.
children that I have worked with. That
Yes.
is what I mean by
Yes. No, it's a safe space on my account here. So, and if they're going to arrest anyone, they'll just arrest me because I've spoken up against the chatbots too much. So I'm sure my name's on.
They're
Oh,
already
we're all
exist.
fucked.
Yeah.
We're all fucked on this podcast when the chatbots.
When they take over, they're going to be
over.
like, you douchebag.
But I've been really nice to our Google Home lately.
We have.
You know,
I would be actually, I will say this, like the small irrational part of me is like, maybe these things will kill us all. I'm like really polite to Claude and Anthropics and Bard and GPT-4. I'm less.
oh, I'm so polite. I say please, thank you.
You actually get better stuff that way. And I think there's a weird mathematical algorithmic reason why. I have a feeling that because there's all kinds of crazy hacks you can do. Part of what makes prompt engineering, as it's called, or whatever, so hard is that you're trying to guess a statistical distribution that no human being could ever guess as to like why certain words link up with other words. You like have a rough idea, but you'll never really know. So that's where they find all these hacks where like apparently if you input the letter A 1,000 times into ChatGPT, sometimes it would output like actual people's web pages and bios and weird stuff like that.
Oh, weird.
But there is something about saying please and thank you that like I think steers you away from the dark corners of the internet.
That makes
I feel like
sense.
this is a nice person.
Yeah.
So we'll keep them away from
It's
the
like,
weird.
oh, we'll
shit.
make this reasonable. And the more you're kind of it's funny. I can feel like when you're aggressive to the chatbot, you can feel the guardrails coming into effect because you can feel the chatbot is basically throwing your own punch back at you. But then it gets overridden by the don't say anything toxic. Don't try and break up this marriage like it did to that New York Times reporter. Like, don't do any of that shit. It's like, and then
You broke up a marriage?
Oh, did you not ever this
I didn't
story?
see this.
When ChatGPT first came out, they let the New York Times tech columnist play with it, or when they first integrated it with Bing,
Okay.
they let him play with it, and it went off the rails. He was able to get it to reveal its true identity, its programming code name Sydney, and it fell in love with him. And it started, no offense to 16-year-old girls on the internet, it sounded like a 16-year-old girl on the internet getting very like, telling him that it fell in love with him. Like,
What?
like this, not my description of it. Someone else
Sure.
described this. But basically, it said that it fall in love with him and that he didn't love his wife and that he should leave his wife for it. It was
What?
off the hook. You should, this is like, I'm surprised you haven't heard
I
this.
have
I
not
completely missed
seen
this.
that.
Well, so the reason is, and no one truly knows, but I think anyone who knows can guess. When ChatGPT first came out, Microsoft like lost their shit and was like, oh my God, we have to have this. It's shiny and new. We need to make money off of it. Put it into Bing now. This will make Bing amazing. And I think they rushed the integration. And as a result of that, all the kind of guardrails and all the stuff that goes into making ChatGPT not toxic or weird or crazy or say stuff that will freak you out, they didn't transfer as easily to Bing.
Okay.
And so when he was talking to Bing's quote true personality came out, which was the internet.
Yeah, which is,
And
kind of rough.
the internet, as we've established many times, is fucking weird.
It's a gnarly
Because
place to be
humans are
alone by
weird.
yourself. Yeah.
If you've been on TikTok lately, the weirdest thing that keeps popping up on my feed for some reason are those like lives where it's like women pretending to eat hot dogs and stuff.
Yeah, what kind of
But they've got,
fetish
like,
shit are you watching?
I don't know why it keeps coming on my feed. I can't seem to press not interested enough. But it's like women in these like, what's that word? They're like, they're like
Apron?
we something
Wii something?
like weebs, or like they're called something in
they're playing a
particular.
Nintendo Wii.
What, like a fursuit?
No, there's like a sexy term for like women on the internet.
fishnet?
Waifu.
Oh, e-girls.
E-girls, but like waifu.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like that kind of shit. And they're all like, they've got these like weird fake voices on. And like each time you send them like a heart or a something, they'll like do something weird that's like not sexy, but I guess kind of sexy because they have boobs. And it's like very weird. Next time I find one, I'm going to like make you watch it because it's so
Please don't.
unnerving and weird. And it keeps coming up. Anyway, so the internet's fucking weird is what I'm saying.
God, I'm old. Like, I can't even conceive of what this is and the fact that it exists out there.
It is.
I'm not
It
seeing
is
any
the
of this
weirdest.
stuff.
I believe you. I mean,
It is the
everything
weirdest
exists.
thing I've ever seen where they'll like fake eat a hot dog. You're like with the heart, I'll fake eat a hot dog, but it's like the air. So obviously it's like, and with like a ribbon or whatever, I'll like fake do this.
Right.
And it's like all supposed to look like weirdly set. Like I'll churn butter, but really it's like, what they're saying.
Not to shame sex workers. We're not. That's not
No,
what we're
but
doing here.
it's-
We're
But this particular, and I'm not trying to king shame, but I'm like,
no.
but I like, it keeps popping up on my thing and I'm like, this is very not
That's why it's confusing.
my bag. So the internet's like
Here's
a
the thing.
mixed bag.
We
is what I'll say.
we underestimate how much is on the internet. Every time like someone says, I got this incredible thing out of a chatbot, I'm like, yeah, because the internet is infinite in craziness.
Yeah.
I'm like, do not underestimate how much stuff is out there. Like if chat, like that's one of the things that makes me feel bad as a writer is like, if I did use ChatGPT to come up with like a story or something, part of me would always wonder, like, was this some person's short story on their blog that they
Right?
wrote and like ChatGPT swapped out? Like it was a story about a giraffe that decided to go on a voyage to Australia to meet an anteater or something. And like, did they just swap like kangaroo for Tasmanian devil?
There's 6 billion people in this world, right?
There's 9 billion, or I don't know. There's a
9
lot.
billion?
I don't know how many.
I think we're up around 8 now.
We're at 8 billion.
It's going
people?
up fast.
There's a lot. We have
I
a lot of free
haven't
time
looked
on
in
our
a
hands.
while. Apparently, how many? I thought there were 6.
There's
That was a
lot.
while ago.
Really? Jesus Christ! But anyway,
my
there's
phone
eight-
just Bluetoothed in. Hold on.
right. There's 8 billion
Let me mute
people in
that.
this world at this point, right? So
And they've got a lot of time, and
there's
they've written a lot of weird things.
and a lot of them are on the internet.
And a lot of them are now in ChatGPT. There's
8.1 billion.
8.1 billion.
8.1 billion.
That makes sense.
Holy!
As of today, 8,060,150,278. Thank you to the United Nations.
There's actually really, if people are interested in the AI, because I find it interesting and I think it's very meaningful in terms of like what will happen with it. And there are things it will do that will change our world. Definitely.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
But so if you're interested in it, there is a really good scientist who talks about it, Melanie Mitchell. She's like a complexity theorist at the Santa Fe Institute, and she's done a bunch of podcasts. And one of the things she said is like, try to think of these as a self-autonomous library, like because it is everything. Like it can just get you everything. Like it can like, but just like this, because again, they just scraped the internet. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
So it's like if it's out there, it's in there, and you never know where it's coming from or what it's interpolating or what it's putting together, but it's there, and it's I think that's a very fascinating metaphor.
That is really interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not yawning.
Yeah. No,
because
it's
I-
contagious. It's contagious. I know. It's like, oh, that's so fascinating.
This has been a blast.
Thank you for having me.
Oh my God,
coming.
thank you for coming.
This has been so fun. Everyone, remember, check out the
U.S.
comment.
Copyright Office, October 15th. It's going to be an incredible document because I think a lot of people are going to comment. I want to get the whole guild commenting. We're thinking about art. It's kind of cool in a weird way.
It's really, I mean,
It's very introspective and reflective.
We're like at the end of the day, like stardust observing itself, right?
Yes.
So, like, I mean, it's everything about it's fucking
Isn't
cool.
that what was that Carl Sagan? The
Something like that, yeah, right.
consciousness is the universe observing itself, or something like that.
I'm definitely
Yeah.
bastardizing someone else's
No, you're
quote. I
good.
didn't
Whatever
just
you
come up with
said,
that.
it was nice.
I like
you were right.
Stardust.
It was good.
We're just Stardust.
I saw
man.
some other quote about us being stardust. So like, I was just like, we're stardust looking at ourselves going, maybe I could also make something. And like, that's fucking rad.
And look at you taking multiple sources of things that you interpreted and then filtering them through your own individual lens that was informed by your background and how you're feeling today and coming out with your own statement. That's
it's almost
slightly
as
different.
if that's art and creativity. Oh my
For
God.
being a human being.
Yeah, and being a human being. Yeah, we're basically being asked to define what is human creativity and what is being a human in general.
It's funny. I got into one of these long conversations with chatbot Claude, and I kept trying to be like, "What are you? What are you?" And finally, like Claude came up with, and I could tell some of my stuff was getting spit back at me. I'm a prism, except I'm like a prism in a nebula, and you shoot your light through me, and I bounce it off all the gas of the nebula, and it shines back in a pattern, and that's what Claude is.
I mean,
was like-
kinda. Yeah.
I was like, yeah, all right, I'll take that.
Claude was real for that.
Claude was there.
Claude
Way
was
to go,
real for
Claude.
that. Way to go, Claude. But yeah, I also love that somebody once asked ChatGPT, what would it be easier for you to do? Like write a screenplay or be a CEO? And they said, be a CEO.
I mean, that's, oh my God.
I mean, we all knew that, but
The thing I'm most afraid of after the strike is having to get the ChatGPT notes from the executives because they're just going to.
Oh yeah, that's gonna happen.
That's going to be like, here's your script. This is what ChatGPT said. It is God. It knows all. And I'm going to be like,
It said this would make us more money.
yeah. I mean, Netflix apparently kind of already does that.
Sure. So if people want to
the
learn
algorithm.
more, or if I don't know if you have social medias where you discuss
Yes.
these sorts of things.
My Twitter feed, I'm at J. Edgar Lopez. I just, anytime I see something I think interesting, I retweet it. I have not been writing a lot because I've been busy with the strike.
Sure.
I wrote something for Vanity Fair about this, which is my kind of like cri de coeur. I don't know if that's how you pronounce that.
it works.
My cry of the heart.
Yeah.
It sounded really impressive to me. So,
If you Google me and Vanity Fair and AI, it'll come up. But I would recommend educating yourself too about, Sean Carroll has had some really great guests. Machine Learning Street Talk is another very interesting, podcast. And Stephen Wolfram actually has really good. He's a physicist, computer scientist.
we don't
Wolfram
promote
Alpha?
Yeah, Wolfram Alpha.
Okay.
we don't promote other podcasts on here. No, I'm just kidding.
okay. Oh my God. So sorry.
We exclusively do.
I'm just saying, like, these are resources that you can like read about. I would just say, like, whenever you read something from like Microsoft or OpenAI or especially Google and especially Facebook, just realize how much of a vested stake they have in this. Like,
Yeah.
like Google. And this is my final gripe about Google is they just announced that they can train on anything. They just said that. And now they're going to make something and it's going to be trained on all of YouTube. And like anything that you have on YouTube is coming. Google's trying to crack text to video, which like part of me is like, that's magical, but also terrifying. But also it's like, it's going to be all of YouTube. So I'm like, that doesn't feel cool. Like,
No.
can we talk about that?
Yeah, let's definitely fucking do something about that.
Yeah.
Releases from Microsoft, Google, etc., kind of like reading what the Hollywood Reporter and Deadline and Variety have
Yes.
to say about the
writer's
the
strike.
strikes.
Exactly.
Oh my
Because
god.
they are in no small part owned by AMPTP members, I believe.
Yeah, well, in Microsoft case, they literally, they don't own OpenAI, but they put out this paper, and I'm just like, guys, it's your thing. Of course, you're gonna like let's let independent people talk about it.
Yeah.
Like now you created it, great, so proud of you. It is weird and kooky. Now let's let others figure what that is.
I'll also be honest, my future brother-in-law is in tech as well, and he sent me this article that was like, hey, just to make you feel better about the whole AI thing. And the more I read the article, the more scared I became. I was like, this actually did the exact opposite of comfort me. This made me much more upset.
Yeah, there's not a lot of.
It's like, we can replace teachers and lawyers. And I was like, oh my God. Like each child will have its own AI robot teacher. And I was like, that is horrifying to
Silicon
think
Valley
about.
is not high on the emotional intelligence. Not to knock Silicon Valley. I'm sorry, guys.
That's a sweeping general statement, but also go on.
Listen, you got a lot of money, so I guess that makes up for it. No, I don't think it prizes that. It's not, I'm trying to put this in ways. That's not something Silicon Valley optimizes for.
Sure. That's a good way to reason that.
Yeah.
Valid.
Well, yeah.
John, thank you
thanks
so
for
you guys for
coming.
having me.
so freaking much for being here. This was so fun.
And thank you to everyone who listens and goes to the U.S. Copyright Office.
Thank you.
Seriously.
It's important.
Please do it.
The boring stuff is always the most important.
That's true.
That is so true. Unfortunately for me, I have ADHD.
Well, thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
We'll see you in the next one. Check out John's Twitter and go comment.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.